Okay, well, in the interest of time, I think we'll just get rolling here. I can begin with an introduction here, if you agree, Crystal and Brennan, and we'll just go for it. So hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar, Invasives BC, tracking the location and management action of invasive plants in BC, presented by two very special guests, Crystal Chadburn and Brennan Webster with the BC's Ministry of Forests. My name is Tamara Slobodin. I am the Senior Manager of Communications with the Invasive Species Council of BC. The Council gratefully acknowledges the territories of the Indigenous peoples of BC, where we live and work to maintain healthy ecosystems for all. Today, I join you from the homelands of the Songhees and Esquimalt peoples, upon which the city of Victoria sits. So please say hello in the chat. We'd love to know who's joining us and where you're calling in from. As I mentioned, I work for the Invasive Species Council of BC. The Council's mission is to take action to build healthy landscapes, habitats, and communities through education and responsible practices to prevent the spread of invasive species. And we are part of an affiliate network bringing together regional independent organizations working to build a strong collective voice for BC in the context of invasive species. So I will mention just off the top that this webinar is being recorded, and if you do have a question that pops up for you during the presentation, please feel free to pop it in the Q&A box. So with that, I am very pleased to introduce our two guests today, Crystal Chadburn and Brennan Webster. Crystal is a professional agrologist who has worked in invasive plant management in BC for more than 18 years. She is the Senior Invasive Plant Specialist with BC's Ministry of Forests, where she helps lead a team supporting strategic initiatives and policy development for invasive plant management throughout BC. And Brennan has been working for the BC Ministry of Forests Invasive Plant Program since 2019. He is the program's invasive species data specialist. Brennan has been involved with the development of InvasivesBC and was a key member of the team leading the transition from the former Invasive Alien Plant Program database over to the new system, both on the development side and supporting users. So welcome, Crystal and Brennan.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity today. I just have to get my screen sorted. Hello to anybody I haven't met, and all of you that I have met, of course. Before I jump in, I just wanted to acknowledge that I am on Vancouver Island and calling in from the territory of the Cowichan peoples today. So yes, Brennan and I are going to run through a little bit about Invasives BC, which of course is our new invasive species database that replaced the Invasive Alien Plant Program, IAPP, last year. And because there's probably a combination of folks newer to the system and those users who are quite familiar, we're going to kind of cover a little bit of an intro just quickly at the beginning to make sure everybody's on the same page. We're going to do some interactive polls throughout. So the first polls will just be a little bit of kind of getting to know you questions, finding out what type of users we have. Then we'll do an overview of the new single map version. I'll start that and talk about a little bit of the new features and the new look and feel of what Invasives BC looks like now since our launch of the new look of it about a month ago. And then I'll hand it over to Brennan, who's going to talk about a few more of the new features, some filtering and sorting, and then focusing on one of the new reports he created, which is a combined IAPP and Invasives BC report that allows users to pull data from both of those data sets. Then we'll do a quick second poll, asking a few more questions to get some information from folks on the line. And then just quickly close with kind of what's coming next, what we're working on now. And then there should be some time for questions and answers at the end. And you do have a question and answer box. So if you want to put those into the box or the chat, if the box isn't working for you, you can do that throughout. And then we'll get to the questions at the end. And don't be shy. We're happy to answer your questions. So what is Invasives BC? It is our new invasive species application for the province of BC. We are one of the furthest along jurisdictions in our mapping and our data set, particularly for invasive plants in North America, for sure. So our system includes not only observation records, like occurrence records, locations of invasive species, it includes treatment, efficacy, and long-term monitoring records. It covers both invasive plants and eventually invasive animals. We should be working on those within the next year or so, but right now it's all the invasive plant forms. And we launched last year with a web-based platform for data entry, viewing, and analysis. And now we're continuing to work on the mobile application that'll allow users to collect that data directly in the field and submit it. And what's really exciting is the mobile app will have both online and offline functionality, which is pretty unique, especially for government systems. So as I said, it replaced our former Invasive Alien Plant Program, which was in place since 2005, but we did pull over all of that data, so it's viewable, searchable through InvasivesBC, so none of that information was lost. And it was replaced on June 12th, 2023, when we launched InvasivesBC, which was a huge milestone. It took a long time to get there. And actually, we're very close to the 1-year anniversary. So happy anniversary to InvasivesBC. We'll have to have a party. We already have over 62,000 records entered since launch, so just under a year, and almost 600 users registered. So as you can imagine, there was a lot of work in getting those users up to speed, and Brennan did a lot of training and helping folks out. And some change management for people who have been using one system one way for many years. And a reminder that this was built under government's, it's called an agile process. So the idea is that you launch the system kind of at the basic functionality, and then you continually add enhancements and features as you go. So that's how we're working on this. It's not finished. There's lots more to come. And you'll continually see those new features and enhancements coming. Also, I never want to talk about our InvasivesBC database without mentioning the Report Invasives mobile application, because folks often get these two different but interconnected, I was going to call them systems, but an application and a system, they often get them confused, but they are different. The Report Invasives app has been in place for longer than InvasivesBC. And it is intended primarily for the public or folks who will never really get access into InvasivesBC and be more of a practitioner or really involved heavily with invasive species management. So the Report Invasives app, you only submit a location, a photo, and some really bare minimum information about the species that you're seeing and the size of the infestation, etc. And whereas folks who have an IDER or BCEID and have access to InvasivesBC, they're submitting more detailed forms, more detailed information, and some of the information is protected from the public, like the treatment information, etc. So the Report Invasives apps, however, when we receive those reports with the Ministry of Forests, and we work closely with other ministries, when we receive all that plant or animal information, we have a triage system where we go through and determine the priority of that species for that region where it was reported. And that kind of allows us or tells us the next step for those reports. So we have actually received reports of species that are not yet in BC, and those, of course, are actioned right away. And species that we do know are within a region, they go in kind of to a holding pen, which then will eventually be entered into InvasivesBC and help form part of the really important inventory that helps land managers determine what species to treat and where, what's already established, what's new, what's increasing, and help form part of that really important baseline database so that we can make some strategic decisions. And of course, as I mentioned, there's different priority levels, and just a quick mention of our invasive species website there. If you're interested in the species that you're reporting, we do have kind of categories from a provincial scale of prevent, early detection, and rapid response. So those are two categories, and the provincial containment. where we would respond quite quickly as long as budgets allow and depending on the jurisdiction of the land that the species has been reported on. Whereas something that's more in the management category might not be actioned right away or ever if it's a well-established species. So this is just a screenshot before I move into our first polls of right now, all of the invasive species records that are showing across the whole province that have been entered since June. And this is just a really cool way to look at, I think, how amazing our network of invasive species managers are. These are just invasive plant records for now, but everywhere from Haida Gwaii, Vancouver Island, all the way up to the northern tip of the province, there has been activity and people entering records in less than a year of a field season. So all the yellow are treatments, the green are observations, the blue are monitoring records, and the purple, which are a little bit harder to see at this scale, are biocontrol activities. So really cool. And thank you to everybody who has jumped on board this new system and helped get all of this information in there. Okay, so our first poll, our tech support, Mel from ICBC, is going to create a little something. There you go. So you should see on your screen a poll pop up. And if you can take a minute and answer, I think there's three questions. And then we will be able to see the answers as they are entered. Very interesting. So I am seeing that, I mean, answers are still coming in, but a large portion of our audience here that have joined used to use IAPP and now uses InvasivesBC. Over half of the people so far. We do have some folks that didn't use IAPP, but they're new now to InvasivesBC. And actually, we have a third who are not using either system and are here just to learn. So that's a really interesting stat for me. And what I want to mention for folks who are new to the system, as I said, we're not going to be covering all the amazing features and in high detail, but there are training videos at InvasivesBC.gov.bc.ca. And Brennan and I did another webinar last year with ISCBC that's on their website as well. So encourage you to have a look at those or reach out. And great. And it looks like most people are using all of the features there under number 3. Very cool. Okay, great. Well, let's end that poll. Thank you so much, you guys. That's really interesting. So the single map template, what's new? And folks, you know, Brennan and I have talked about the word single map template probably doesn't mean much to folks, but from launch of June up until now, about a month ago, we had a version of InvasivesBC where every time you clicked on like each of these tabs along the top, like the records page to current activity, it had a different map, a separate unlinked map attached to it. So you would do all your sorting and filtering and zooming in and find your location on one map. But then if you opened a form to create a new form, you would be given a new fresh map and have to re-find your location and do all your filtering in a different window. So to help solve that, as well as really significantly speed up InvasivesBC, especially for those who were experiencing performance issues with older or slower machines, we launched a replaced version of InvasivesBC last month. And so now the biggest change is that you only have one map. That's why we call it the single map, and it stays on the screen at all times. And then as you click along through the tabs at the top, the bottom part of your screen changes based on whatever tab you're on. And the map remains the same. And that's the same for features like the what's here, etc. It all shows in the bottom there. And the way to change what proportion you're viewing of the map versus the information at the bottom, there's 3 little lines here, and you just click and drag that button And so if you're working in a table and you want to be doing some filtering and sorting or looking in more detail at records, you can drag that up so you're seeing mostly the bottom portion of the screen. And if you're really working on the map, like creating a new record and drawing your geometry, you can pull that all the way down so you're seeing primarily all of the map on your screen. If you're making a new record, for example, how this would work is you click on your little new record button there. And after you open up a record, it does open down below, but you don't need to be looking at the text fields until after you've drawn your geometry. So you use the little buttons on the top left to draw your geometry. You might want to flip to the topo map there using that little topo sat button to toggle back and forth, make sure you're in the right spot. And then you would drag that bottom portion of the screen all the way up so that you can go ahead and fill in your form there. And you can go back and forth between the two with no problem and no loss of information. The other change that people might be wondering about is all of the save and edit and copy and paste buttons used to be within the form at the bottom. They're now just hiding under this save menu. So if you click on that save menu, you can see your options: save to draft, copy form, paste form, delete or close. And of course, it's grayed out right now because the form that I was working with on these screenshots wasn't completely filled out. But as soon as you fill it out and all your validations are checked and you have no more red fields showing you need to make a change, this little button will pop up too, and it'll be save and publish to submitted, and then you can save your form directly into the database. So the other big difference that we've streamlined, it's much less clunky, is turning on layers and labels on the map. So there's three main data sets: my drafts, the InvasivesBC activities, and the IAPP records, those ones that we brought over from IAPP. So in the past, you used to have to turn them on here and then click a separate button. You no longer have to do that. Now, all you have to do, here's a little zoom in of those buttons in the red circle. All you have to do is turn on the right there are the icons for the layers, and the other ones that are showing turned off right now is the labels. And you just have to click those and it'll turn on or off, whichever you are wanting to do. So for example, if I turn on the labels for these records, you can see the labels show up there, and you can toggle those on and off at whatever zoom you want. If they are taking a while to load, you can try zooming in or filtering down your record set. But for the most part, it's been pretty snappy and quite quick for most users. The other thing is the what's here, as I mentioned, also opens down in the bottom half of the screen now, no longer is a bump out. So if you've clicked your what's here, you've chosen the records you want to look at, you can see there's a treatment and an observation record here. And you can hover, or you can click on those to highlight them on the map. And you can also click on it to open up a record. And then of course it opens in the bottom. And then you can use those three lines to pull that bottom up to read the full record. And there's the opening button there. The other thing we snuck into the new release is a new feature that had been on the list for a while. And it's the new option for 1, 2, or 5 square meter points. So when we first launched, if you chose the point, you can choose, every time you have to do a form, you have to do a geometry of the size of the record, either the treatment or the observation that you're submitting. And you can choose to make a point or a polygon. And in the past, your points were automatically 1 meter squared. But we realized very quickly that even a 5 square meter point is very hard to draw as a polygon. So now when you click the point, if you wanted to make a point record, this little text box pops up and asks you if you want 1, 2, or 5 square meters for your point. Anything larger than that, you draw a polygon. And the other thing we found is that our dev team, with the now that a lot of the technical debt had been cleaned up, we're actually seeing little changes being rolled out quite quickly. And so rather than being able to update you guys on all of the changes through emails or training sessions, because of the Agile build model, we decided one better way to communicate with users would be to create this news feed. So you'll see a new tab at the top called News. This was just released a few weeks ago, and an email came out to notify users about this. But it just as little notes from our developers about what they've changed or what they've launched. Some of them you won't notice, like a crash fix, but some of them are little changes of different ways or different tips on, how to use the decimal points in the chem treatment form to avoid errors, et cetera, et cetera. So have a look at that every once in a while. And just quickly, what hasn't changed: requesting or updating your access, the public-facing map, training pages, and logging in and out, they're all the same as they've been since June. The batch uploader page is the same. The schemas are the same, although Brennan has been working on new schemas and some fixes on validations to some schemas. So always go to the batch uploader page to get your most recent version of those spreadsheets to use. Don't use old ones. And the forms and fields and validations are all the same in all of the various forms. The reports page looks and functions the same, although there's new reports Brennan's going to talk about in 1 second here. And the access levels remain the same for now. So you're only able to delete or edit your own records unless you're admin. And not to worry, no loss or change to any of the data currently in the system. Okay, so over to you, Brennan, and he will bring us through a few more of the new features.
Thanks, Crystal. Hi, I'm Brennan Webster. I'm the invasive species data specialist for the Invasive Plant Program. I'm calling in from Castlegar on the unceded traditional territory of the Syilx, Sinixt, and Ktunaxa peoples. So this is just a summary of what I'm going to go over here. First, table filtering is one of the main things that's been changed, or one of the most noticeable changes. I think the new filtering method on the version 2 is more user-friendly and intuitive. I think people will find it easier to use. I'm going to talk about spatial filtering a bit. It's largely the same, but there are a few tweaks, so I'll talk about that. CSV extracts, it sounds like there's a lot of IAPP users in here, so they're very similar to how they were in IAPP. There are just more of them now, and the combined observation survey summary I'll go over because it's kind of a new thing. And then I'm also going to talk about custom record sets to visualize data on the map. If you want to change the slide there. So, like I mentioned, one of the main things that's changed in version 2 is the way the filters work on the record set. We had issues in version 1 where people would enter filters in the headers of the columns, and then when you save and apply, they sort of get hidden until you turn them back on again. And it was kind of confusing and unintuitive. Like, you would apply filters and sort of forget that they were there and then think that stuff was missing. So like you can see in the screenshot right here, now all the filters populate on top of the record set and just stack one by one. You can hide them if you want, just to make more space. If you have like 10 filters, you're going to start seeing less records. So there is a hide filter button on the left there. And that doesn't remove them, it hides them. The one next to it, the clear filters button, will remove all the filters. Another thing that's changed is you no longer need to click the apply filter button. The filter is applied as you type in the value box. So each letter you type, it will continually send a query to the database and filter. So you just type, add filters, type, and it'll just keep filtering for you. The filters aren't case sensitive. Another new feature is the operators. So people might have noticed on the left side, there's an operator column. There are two options, and or. And I'll explain a little bit how those work. So the way this option wasn't in the previous version, but it was implicit when you were using the old version that it was an and. So if you put in Japanese knotweed and then you put in another filter for spotted knapweed, the filtered data set would have to satisfy both of those criteria. So you would only end up with records that had both Japanese knotweed and spotted knapweed on them. So the way the OR operator changes this is you can now add like 10, 20 filters with the OR operator, and it will just get any record for any of those plants. So maybe the better way to think about it is if you're using the OR operator, it's additive. And if you're using the AND operator, it's subtractive. So introducing like another filter with the OR operator will often increase the number of records you can see. And then using the AND operator will usually decrease what you can see, although it depends on the specific case that you're using the filters for. Maybe next one. So another thing that's changed is where the CSV extract button is. Like Crystal mentioned, the reports have stayed the same, so there is no change in the reports. It's just in a different spot now. Yeah, there's a click here for CSV export that will expand the CSV types and show you the generate CSV button. So you need to click the generate CSV button and the database will start creating a CSV for you. It'll show you like a spinner for a little bit. And then once the CSV is created, it will show you a download CSV button and you can download the CSV. Depending on how many records you try to make a report out of, it could take up to a minute. So if you look at the number at the very bottom and it says like 20,000 or 30,000 or something, and you try and get a report, it could take a while. So if it's spinning, don't worry, it probably hasn't crashed. It's just working. I guess one thing I should mention about this is you'll often get a different number of rows or records in the CSV that you extract, and there are a couple of reasons that that'll happen. So in this screenshot example, say I haven't filtered by record type. So I have observations and I have treatments and I have monitorings. So if I get the terrestrial plant observation summary, it's only going to give me those records. So in this example, I have 480 something records. I wouldn't, if I got one of the reports, get that many records. I would probably get less because it will only give you what is in that specific report type. And another reason the numbers will be different is in this record set, it's got one row per activity, but activities can have multiple plants. So if you have an observation, it could have 4 or 5 plants, basically any number of plants. But then in the report, the rows are separated by plant. So an observation that has 5 plants on it, in the report, that will become 5 rows, just to make it easier to filter and manage the data. Next. So this is just an example of an extract. Anybody who's used IAPP before will recognize it. It's just a CSV with columns for every field that's in the form. There are a lot more columns in the reports for the InvasivesBC records just because there are more fields for those forms, but they're pretty similar. So people should have no problem transitioning between them. And in InvasivesBC, there's a report for each form type. So I think there's 12 forms, and so there's 12 reports. Next, I'm going to talk about the spatial filters. So these work the same with a couple tweaks. There's the main difference, I guess, is that now the button to create a spatial filter, either a drawn or an uploaded KML, is under the layer picker, which is a button in the top right. And there's a add custom button. After clicking the button, it'll show you a menu where you can either add a new boundary, like KML or a drawn shape, or you can remove ones that you've made and you just want to clean up what you see in the layer picker. If you click add new, it'll give you an option between uploading a KML or drawing a shape. Once you've added a shape, they will show up in the layer picker, and you can turn them on or turn them off, and you can also use them to filter in the record set. And there's a screenshot of that on the next slide. So here's an example of a boundary that I drew. You can see it's on the map, and it's also in the layer picker. It's turned on, that's why you can see it on the map. I gave it a name, and then I can also, once I see it in the layer picker like that, I can use it to filter the record set. So the way you do that is under filter type, you select spatial drawn or spatial uploaded, and then the value will show in a dropdown under the value field. And that works the same as the other filters. Once you select it, you don't have to click any buttons. It will just do the filtering for you. One thing that's changed that people might not know about is when you're uploading a KML, you used to only be able to upload a polygon. Now you can upload points and lines as well. And this is useful if you have, screen's turning off. If you have external data like points or lines that you want to view on the map with the InvasivesBC data, if you upload those by KML and toggle them on in the layer picker, you'll be able to see them on the map alongside the InvasivesBC and the IAPP data. You can also use points and lines to filter, same as you do with polygons. Although, depending on what you're trying to do, if you try and filter using points to like narrow down IAPP data, you might get kind of confusing results because it's unlikely that your points will intersect another point. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, custom record sets. This is another function on the main records page. You can add either an IAPP or an InvasivesBC custom record set. The buttons for those are down at the bottom. You either add a layer of records, which is the InvasivesBC, or add an IAPP layer of records. And the main use for this is to visualize on the map. So in my example, I made 3 new record sets. I changed the filter for the first one to be Japanese knotweed. I changed the second one to be spotted knapweed, and the third one, I think was yellow hawkweed. And then I changed the colors. Knotweed is green, knapweed is purple, and hawkweed is yellow. And this just helps visualize on the map. You can kind of customize what it looks like. And yeah, that's a cool feature. So one other way to extract data is using the reports page. The main difference between getting reports this way and getting them from the records page or the map viewer page is you can't use spatial filters in the Metabase reports page, and you also can't view the record set on the map on this page. But the benefit of using it is it has sort of enhanced filtering functionality. So say like a use case for this is if you have a list of like 30 priority plants that you want to search for in a report, it's a lot easier to use one of the filter widgets, and you can quickly like just check box, sort of like you do in Excel when you're filtering, just check box all the plants you want, and it's kind of easier on this page. The other difference is there are more reports available on this page than there are on the main map viewer. There basically any report that has a spatial component is only on the reports page. So there's plant area summaries and the combined observation report that I'm going to talk about are only on this page. So maybe next page. The combined report. So the issue that we had with having two data sets, we have the old IAPP data set that is sort of like historical data now, where it's set in stone, it can't be changed, like users can't change it. It's got separate attributes from the InvasivesBC data. And so up until I made this report, the only way to sort of aggregate the two data sets was to extract the IAPP data set and then extract the observations from the InvasivesBC data set and combine them yourself. So this combined report should help users sort of avoid that step, which was kind of time consuming. So this includes everything from the IAPP site selection extract and most recent observations from the InvasivesBC observation extracts, the aquatic and the terrestrial as well. And a most recent observations is, the definition is basically if there are two observations of the same plant that overlap, you will only get the most recent of those. So we've only had 1 year of data so far, so it doesn't make too much of a difference right now. But the idea is if you have multiple years of observations in the same spot of the same plant, you don't want to see all of them. You just want to see the most recent, the most current data. So that's what you get in this report. Let's see the next one. So the meat of the report is kind of in these spatial columns here. So all the columns except for the ID column in here sort of have a spatial component. So if you can see on the left, there's an ID column, and those are all observation IDs. One of the issues with having these two data sets, people don't, without looking on the map, you don't know whether there's a site next to an observation of the same plant. So you may be getting duplicates if you're trying to create site lists just with spreadsheets. Without looking on the map, you can't tell if you're getting duplicates because they're so close together. So the nearest ID and the distance to nearest column is meant to kind of solve that for people. So the ID for these are observation IDs. And if there is an IAPP site of the same plant within 100 meters of that observation, the site ID will be in the nearest ID column, and the distance to the nearest IAPP site will be in the distance to nearest in meters column. If the columns are blank, there is no nearest of the same plant. And if the distance is 0, it means it just intersects completely. These two columns, they only compare between the two data sets. So if you're looking at an IAPP record, the nearest ID will always be an observation ID, and vice versa. If you're looking at an observation, you can see in the screenshot, the nearest ID will always be an IAPP ID. The other spatial columns are the cluster columns. So any records of the same plant within 100 meters of each other will have the same cluster ID. And the cluster ID is just the name of the plant and then a randomly assigned integer. So yeah, if you had a cluster of a bunch of IAPP records and observations of the same plant quite close together, they would all have the same cluster ID. And you can see in the IDs in cluster column, it's just a list of those IDs. Yeah, so if you've say removed the duplicate IAPP sites from your record set, like using the nearest ID column, and you're questioning whether one should have been in there, if you search for that ID, it will probably be in the IDs and cluster column still, and then you'll know you're not getting any duplicates. And another way to use the cluster stuff is the total cluster area. So there's no fancy like spatial math going on in this. It's just a sum of the area in square meters of all the records in that cluster. So like any overlapping area is getting double counted in this, but it's just intended to give you an idea of the composition of a cluster. So if you see a cluster that has 2 records in it and it's got like a 500,000 square meter area, you know the cluster is 2 very big polygons. If you see there's like 15 IDs in the cluster and it's only like 500 square meters, you know it's a cluster of a bunch of like pretty small polygons. So that's basically the intent of that. And I think that is maybe all I have for the reports.
Okay, good. So yes, I was going to say, I know a lot of the technical side of things is probably a lot, especially for users who are not familiar with the system. But Brennan's going to put a link in the chat to a document that'll explain that report, the duplicate report, and how to use it, and some tips on that as well for some more information. And of course, as always, please reach out to Brennan, because sometimes these things are best learned after you actually try to do them, and then have a look at it and bring your questions to us. So now it's time for poll number 2. We have a few more questions diving in specifically for the folks who have been using InvasivesBC. We'd like to know a few things about your favorite feature, and the filtering features, and kind of where, if it was up to you, where you'd like our team to focus on next. Very curious to hear back on how it's been going for folks. So you can see the poll now on your screen, and I can see that folks are starting to enter, so we'll just give a minute there. Okay. So we have 65% have participated, and that matches, 71% have participated. So I think we're close to the percentage of folks who are familiar with InvasivesBC as well. So Map Viewer wins as the favorite feature. Other people like the batch uploader. And have you used the filtering features to build a map? No. So interestingly, if you want to let us know in the chat or an email later why you haven't used that, maybe folks, you just weren't aware of it, or you just are using different systems. We're curious about that. And lastly, if you could choose on where your team would focus on improvements next, we have a tie, and this is our challenge. Every different user bases want different things first, right? So I'm seeing sorting, filtering, and viewing records on the map. Yes, we definitely need some improvements there, especially as the data, the number of records is increasing. We need to streamline how to sort and filter much easier, and hopefully see the difference between the positive observations and negative observations. And we've got some ideas there, but much work to be done there. The data entry. is just under there. But the winner by a slice, I thought this would actually be a huge winner, but the mobile application. And absolutely, that is the next step coming, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So I think we're done with the poll there, Mel. Very good. Thank you for all your feedback there. I will be passing that on to the development team. They were actually the ones who suggested we do a little bit of polls there to find out, not just from Brendan and I, but from the user base, kind of how you're feeling about things. Okay, so let's see, what time is it? Perfect on time here. List a couple slides and then we will open up for question and answer. So make sure if you have any questions, you've put them into the question and answer box, please. So what are we working on now? Surprise, it's still the mobile app. For folks who have been with us throughout this journey of building the new system, you know that we have taken longer than we planned to build the mobile application, but a lot has changed, and you can use the web version through Chrome on your device, which I do regularly. Lots of cool mobile features already in place, like the Find Me, if you're driving down the road, if you're in service, if you have data or Wi-Fi, it will follow you along. And so I use this very regularly when I'm in an area with service, just through the Chrome. And so in the past 3 weeks, I would say, our developers have fixed up a bunch of things that were working well on web with a mouse clicking, but now are better for touch screens. We had to do some changes there. And so lots of tweaks and improvements there when using even the web page on mobile. So check those out. And we're just working through a few of the requirements to get to the Apple Store and the Android platforms. So we're working on that kind of stuff. And our plan is to launch the actual app, mobile app, which will look very similar to the web viewer, with the online functionality first, to get that out there, because we're getting a lot of questions about, well, what will it look like? What will it feel like? So folks will have that soon-ish to be able to start playing around with. Next will be all the caching pages. So the caching of data to be able to use that mobile app offline will be the phase 2 of the mobile app. And then just a comment about the Invasives BC layer. We've been trying to get it into the BC data warehouse for quite some time, but they are relatively short-staffed. So I now have been given a date that they will add it into the data warehouse mid-summer. So I know there are folks that will never use Invasives BC, but they just want that layer to be available in the data warehouse. So we haven't forgotten about it. It is coming soon. So just to close, what do I do if I run into issues? Step 1 is always to refresh your browser, please. Oftentimes that'll fix it. It's just something with Chrome timing out or whatever. And then don't hesitate to email us. So our general inbox is InvasivesBC.gov.bc.ca. And if you have been given an error on your screen, it works really well to screenshot that and send it to us. Also, I just wanted to point out there is information on our general invasive species provincial government website. We have an Invasives BC database page, and that has a bunch of information. It tells you how to request access. So for folks that are here just to learn about the new system, I encourage you to have a look. If you have a business BCE ID or an IDER, you can request access. And then we have a reference guide, as well as some more little documents with some tips on kind of the batch uploader, how to, and this new report, everything that's a bit tricky. We try to put little guides on there. And then there's some fillable PDF field forms that are available. So if you want to take them out on your iPad to fill out forms in the field and then come back and enter them into the system, you can do that to make sure you've captured all of the required mandatory fields while you're out there. Those are there. And that's it for now. So Brennan's going to come back and join me, and then Tamara, I believe it's over to you to see if we have any questions.
Great. Thank you so much for that super informative presentation, Crystal and Brennan. We do have a couple of questions and a few minutes left before we need to conclude. So let's see. There's a question from Molly. When are you expecting updates to the batch upload templates, and will they be major changes?
Brennan, do you want to answer that one? Batch upload question.
Yeah. So the most major updates are just going to be the addition of the missing templates. So there should be a template for every form type, but right now the biocontrol ones are missing and the monitoring ones are missing. The biocontrol ones will come out first. The monitorings, I'm not sure how long that's going to take. They're more complicated. But as far as major changes to the existing templates, there probably won't be any. I'm thinking of adding like extra plants so that you can put like 2 or 3 plants on a single batch upload row. But besides that, there won't be any major changes. They'll stay the same. The only changes would be more to like the codes, like the additions of employers or funding agencies and herbicides or something like that, but there shouldn't be major updates.
Okay, thank you for that. Erica asks, as someone who hasn't used IAPP, what was the motivation to create IBC as a new system?
Sure, I can take that. It started about, honestly, 10 years ago or more now, 15 years ago. And there were a series of IAPP users that got together. Some of you may remember we got together in a hotel room in Victoria, and we did all sorts of breakout working groups, talked about what we really loved with IAPP and what was missing and what we wanted to go to. So one of the big drivers was to get to a mobile app, just to modernize, right? IAPP was an Oracle database. It was very relatively basic. I mean, it was exciting and new and better than other provinces, of course, had for invasive species or invasive plant management. But we wanted to modernize, get a map attached to it. So IAPP had a map viewer through IMAP.BC, but IAPP didn't have its own map component. You weren't able to filter and sort and see right there in real time on the map. So there was a lot of work that happened outside of the system through GIS, et cetera. So we wanted to bring in a lot of that ability to be more user-friendly and customizable maps. And then one of the biggest changes, which folks are still wrapping their heads around, including myself, was the change from point system only into allowing for polygons, points and polygons. And so that's because with IAPP, you had the first time an invasive plant was found, a survey was completed, it created that point, and that became an IAPP site. And then from then on, if you had any other species or treatments happening within 100 meters of that original point, the rules were you had to attach it to that point. So the points weren't actually geographically, when you looked on a map, they weren't actually in the same location than the plants might be. And with increasing interest in where herbicides going, et cetera, when we were uploading a herbicide record onto a point that was just within 100 meters, it wasn't showing truly exactly on the ground where that herbicide was. And it was only based on a survey estimate in hectares, whereas now we're in square meters, and we can actually look at that polygon and have the system decide on the area, as opposed to relying on different people's brains and estimates. So it's the accuracy is increasing, and it's very different. So I could go on that, but those were the main drivers for sure.
Great, thanks for that. And I think you mentioned that in the first year, you've seen something like 600 users with more than 60,000 records entered. I'm curious, is that what you were expecting for the first year?
I think it's over what we were expecting. However, a lot of the users that used IAPP were under contract, and so they didn't have a choice. So I say thank you very much for starting to use Invasives BC, but a lot of people were forced to when we took IAPP away and brought Invasives BC in. So I do think it's probably a little bit more than we expected, but definitely we did know that there would be a large quantity of records even within the first year. So yeah.
All right, and perhaps we'll make this the last question to you both. Can you share any success stories from the first year of the new system?
Oh gosh, Brandon, I'll think of, to me, the fact that we launched and we have so many users and we have so many records is a success in itself. And I will say our developers have put out a few reports where we have had significantly less downtime, breaks or moments where we didn't, the system was down than IAPP had on a regular basis. So IAPP used to go down relatively frequently, and it was an external contractor that would have to help us bring it back up to speed. Now that everything's in-house, if something does break, it's being fixed within a couple hours often. So to me, that's a big success, and we don't have a lot of need to be sorry users, it'll be back on Monday or whatever. So less downtime. But Brendan, is there any other successes? Brendan's been working so hard with all the users.
No, I agree with you. The amount of records that we got, like the screenshot you showed at the start of the presentation of it basically covering BC in records, I think is cool. Just the data is, for the most part, more accurate if you look, because it's all polygons. And I think that's part of the reason we have so many records, and it seems like more than we would have gotten in a year, is it is more accurate. Where like an IAPP site was just a point that could have in the past an IAPP represented like many hectares on the side of a road. Now it's more likely to be like a few patches if the user like took the time to draw them out. So I think it's more accurate. And yeah, it's interesting to see if you go in there and you have both of the layers turned on, you'll see like a point that was an IAPP site, and then like a giant polygon that covers a field is actually where the plant was. So I think it's interesting to see, and I think that's cool.
Absolutely, and we'll be able to track change over time more accurately that way as well too, not just with estimates of area.
Okay, well, that's great information. We do have a few more questions. I'm not sure, maybe we can respond to these in email. I'm just mindful of the time and of your time, and we thank you tremendously for this great presentation, Crystal and Brennan. I'm not sure what usually happens when there are extra questions.
Yeah, why don't I take a look at them, and we can email out either. Probably just to whoever's logged on. If you guys have a list of anyone who joined. Yeah, perfect. We can do that.
Great. Thank you so much again for making time for us on behalf of the Invasive Species Council of BC, and for offering this great information, Crystal and Brennan. Thank you.
Great. Thank you guys. And thanks for everyone that joined.